Hello, friends and colleagues, and welcome to the Tourism Skillshop, hosted by State of Washington Tourism, SWT. My name is Matthew Ozuna, and I am the Destination Development Manager at SWT. I will introduce today's webinar on dark sky tourism. Please utilize the chat function in Zoom to say hello, and let us know where you are zooming in from today. Feel free to share your questions and comments in the chat box at any time during the webinar. You can utilize the Q&A feature near the end of the webinar as well. Marianne Graff will be joining us today. She is the Senior Content Manager at SWT. Marianne will monitor the chat and help address questions from the audience near the end of the webinar. Now, folks, let me tell you a little bit more about this webinar series, the Tourism Skillshop. The Tourism Skillshop is one of many industry educational programs from State of Washington Tourism. This webinar series will engage with colleagues across the tourism sector and broaden their industry knowledge, skills, and network. Each webinar will highlight a specific issue or skill for tourism professionals to ponder and discuss with industry experts. State of Washington Tourism will host live webinars of the Tourism Skillshop on the third or fourth Thursday of every month from 10 to 11 a.m. These webinars are free and open to all tourism stakeholders. The webinars will also be recorded and shared with registrants, as well as other users on the SWT YouTube channel. For Tourism Skillshop and other industry updates, visit the SWT Industry website, sign up for the Industry Update newsletter, and follow SWT on LinkedIn. Tourism stakeholders may also join the SWT Facebook group for further discussion on topics related to the Tourism Skillshop and other industry news, issues, and events. All right, now let's dive into today's webinar. This webinar in the Tourism Skillshop will focus on dark sky tourism. More than just a trend, dark sky tourism is a nod to community values and strategic planning. This webinar will cover the economic, cultural, and environmental significance of places with minimal light pollution. Attendees will learn about the products and services associated with dark sky tourism, as well as gain resources and strategies to engage with a wide range of stakeholders. DarkSky International, formerly known as the International Dark Sky Association, will be featured on the webinar, along with case studies and certifications. Guest speakers include Don Nilson, Natural Resource Planning Consultant and Educator, and Bob Hackett, the Executive Director of Travel Southern Oregon. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about our guest speakers today. Dawn is the sole proprietor of Fibonacci Enterprises in Portland, Oregon. Her experience in dark sky conservation includes crafting public policy, providing dark sky interpretation and training, conducting outdoor lighting audits, which I find fascinating, and leading efforts to establish international dark sky places in the Pacific Northwest. Dawn's work in Oregon has helped communities, chambers of commerce, tour guides, innkeepers, and ranchers develop, pursue, and market dark sky tourism opportunities. A perfect example of her work can be found in Southern Oregon. Dawn envisioned and directed the efforts in the Oregon Outback that culminated in its 2024 certification as the world's largest dark sky sanctuary. Good work there, Dawn. And Bob came to Travel Southern Oregon in 2017 after working 19 years as the marketing manager at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland. He also taught American literature and creative writing at Willamette University and Oregon State University before his venture into the tourism sector. In Southern Oregon, Bob works with other tourism stakeholders in a 5-county region to support destination promotion and development efforts, which include dark sky tourism. Bob was honored with Travel Oregon's Tourism Leadership Award in 2019 and helped create the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Network, which won the Governor's Tourism Award. I believe that was this March, Bob. I mean, even though it was a 2023 award it was presented this March in Salem in 2024. And that's where I got excited about dark sky tourism. And I was hoping to bring some of that to Washington State And here we are today. So Bob and Don, thank you for joining the webinar today. Bob, we'll get to you a little later. Marianne, I'm sure you'll do a great job monitoring the chat. And Don, we'll kick it off with you and your PowerPoint slide. Oh, Don, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just put this together as really like a 101. So this is at the upper level. If anybody has questions, there'll be contact information at the end. You can contact me. This is a photograph here of Mount St. Helens with a quarter moon with my handheld iPhone. And you're looking at Sagittarius, and off to the right, you see a blotchy area, and you're actually seeing in that picture two nebula that you can see with your naked eye in a dark sky. So what is this thing? Astrotourism, dark sky tourism. We hear different names about town. Astrotourism is focusing on sky-related tourist activities, stargazing, astrophotography, chasing eclipses and auroras, and visiting facilities related to astronomy like observatories and planetariums. In Oregon, we use the word dark sky tourism because it's much more inclusive and it brings people out into the night and it extends tourism destinations and features into the evening, go well beyond the day. And so dark sky tourism includes all those activities that are found under astrotourism, but it also includes things like moon bathing, nocturnal creature guided tours, indigenous and cowboy storytelling, and night sky inspired artistic events, and pretty much any other thing you can think of because the sky is the limit. So why are we talking about dark skies? How are they gaining so much attention? They're gaining so much attention because particularly in developed countries around the world, we're losing them. So the idea that you walk outside your house and you look up and you see the Milky Way and a bowl full of stars is just disappearing year by year by year. And you can see in this top photograph, this graphic here, you can see from the late 1950s, right? And we had already had electricity for a long time already, for several decades. But you can see the difference between the late 50s, middle 70s, you can see the line for the Mississippi. And then in 1997, and then in 2001, a study was done and a prediction was made. And the prediction in 2001 was this is how we would look in 2025, which is already next year. And interestingly enough, this map over here, this is the US in 2016. And it underestimates the actual effect because we didn't understand all this issue of blue light and that we're getting from LED lights. But as you can see, the West is still a very dark place. So where you see black, that's the blackest. That's the highest, that's pristine sky quality. And the outback that was mentioned, that's all in this area here. When you get into gray, you're in excellent skies. I mean, these are skies people in other countries. I mean, if you look down here in Europe, you can't really envision what that quality of sky looks like. This is quality 1, the gray is quality 2. You get into the navy blue, you're still in a pretty exceptional sky. You can see you have to be in the Alps or in the Pyrenees area of Europe. The black that's here in Europe, these are seas. So those aren't, if you're on the ocean, if you're out on a boat, that's fine. But we still are doing, we're still pretty lucky, but we're losing it fast. And so that's all the rage. If you look at where a lot of our tourism comes from these days too, over here in Japan and over here in South Korea, you can see that they're pretty light polluted. So Oregon and Washington become really great destinations for folks. And so I just want you folks to take a screenshot of this link here, because if you want to see what the sky is, what's the sky quality in your area, whether you're in the Seattle area or you're out in Walla Walla, if you put this link, you can move around yourself. It's an interactive link and you'll see the difference. And just to show from state by state, again, here's Oregon and, where we have all the Bortle 1, it's called, and Bortle 2 skies. But where you have blue, like I showed you, if you're in Western Europe and you're in East Asia, you're not seeing anything like the blue. You know, the blue is the best you're going to get. If you're in green, you're still seeing the Milky Way. If you're in yellow, red, or, you know, so bright that you're actually, you know, they had to come up with another color for it, for what's happening over the years, you're not, you're seeing at most 100 stars in these areas. Whereas in these areas here, and you can see through the, you know, around the Palouse here, when you're in these areas here, you could be seeing up to over 2,000 stars,
Oh, wow.
naked eye. So, you know, sustainability is a hot topic, and sustainability we always just kind of interpret as the status quo. And when it comes to dark skies, we, as you can see from those maps, we've lost a lot. And so, more than sustainable, because yes, obviously we don't want it to get worse. But I got into this 15 years ago because after, you know, decades in environmental resources management, you know, as an ecologist, there are so many huge environmental issues to tackle, but this is really one where you can set the clock back. You can easily set the clock back. So even beyond sustainable, this is something that we could consider as restorative tourism if done well. But, you know, at least at a minimum, sustainable. And so what is sustainable? Able to maintain or support a process continuously over time. Process we're talking about when we're talking about dark skies is a night and a day, because that's all that it really is. The Earth's orbiting and we have a night and a day. And we've just begun to light up the night almost to the degree in some places with some lighting brighter actually than daylight.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so the process we're saving is to have a natural night. And so if we talk about sustainable travel, the aim would be to sustain or enhance the character, the geographical character of the place, its environment, culture, aesthetics, heritage, and the well-being of residents. When we talk about residents, let's talk beyond people and include all the living things that have evolved on the earth with a day and a night.
Don, I
And
think
so,
that's a key point. And I don't think you use the term regenerative tourism, but I think it would certainly qualify. And I think this is a great opportunity, folks, to mention State of Washington Tourism's Tourism Regeneration Grant that could help with develop these types of experiences and opportunities with dark sky tourism. So whether it's with the Tourism Regeneration Grant or the Technical Assistance Grant, to hire someone like a Don Nilson to help you with the planning. There's a lot of opportunities for grant funding with State of Washington Tourism. We might talk a little bit more about that at the end of the webinar, but Don, I think you're right. I think there's many benefits here. Great for the environment, culture, community, industry. Well said.
yeah. So, you know, we always talk about that, the triple win or the, you know, the pillars of success. And, you know, if we protect the night sky, we're not only protecting habitat, but we're preserving rural character and we're giving communities an economic boost. And if you want more information on really how to organize, how to protect the night, ideas for events and so on and so forth, this document that Travel Oregon prepared, I helped them prepare this. It's about 14 pages, but in it are 100 links. So you can take a really deep dive. You can look at the 14 pages, or you can take a deeper dive into the 100 links there and go to that toolkit. So what does sustainable dark sky tours and experiences look like? I just have a few photographs because if we use this form of tourism, we really need to be responsible stewards and respect the night. You know, that's the experience that our people are having, is something of the night. And so if we light it up, that's not a sustainable experience. And it's not the degree of experience that people could have. So if you look over here, all the telescopes out, you only see red light because red light's not going to disrupt your night vision. If you look over here, a campsite. So the only light that we had naturally, right, was the moon, stars, and fire. And so the amber light doesn't affect animals as much or affect our own eyes as much at night. And so, you know, we have opportunities for going back to storytelling, trips where people take people out at night and we have storytelling around a campfire. Cross-country skiing under a full moon. So you say, well, a moon, doesn't that make the sky less dark? Yeah, it does. But if we're not talking astrotourism, we're talking dark sky tourism, just getting people out into the night, extending tourist resources into the evening. And a full moon paddle. I've been on those in Humboldt Bay in California and in Puerto Rico. They're exceptional. And a full moon cross-country ski, if you've never done that, it's an amazing experience. All that reflected light on the snow and the peacefulness and the stillness. And then, of course, just being out with your family hand in hand. When you're under a bowl of stars, even with no moon out, it's so bright under a super dark sky that you can see your shadow from the starlight.
Don,
And then
what
this is,
about, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, with this,
yeah,
with wildlife, correct?
yeah, this is a photo I took from Soviet Island in Portland in the Columbia Basin, and migratory bird season, it's wonderful to go out there. So even taking a group out doing doing tours at night for birding when all the birds are migrating and having folks capture. I mean, this was just a simple picture I just got lucky and took. I wasn't after it,
Ex
but all the birds flying by the moonlight during migration is exciting. So all kinds of ideas you can have to get people out
and
sustainably into the
and
night.
I'm glad you added that that photo because that was my experience in New Zealand. It wasn't with migratory birds, but it was with kiwis, the nocturnal birds that came out at night. Opened my mind to activities at night, tourism activities at night. When I thought, wow, what am I going to do? Sure enough, we saw a kiwi in the wild in New Zealand, along with cultural and historical lectures from a local guide. But yes, excellent. Wildlife at night, wildlife viewing. I
Wildlife at
think,
night, bats. I've
yeah,
done
there you
bat.
go.
I'm a certified bat ambassador for Bat Conservation International. I never got more excitement than taking people out on all the bat walks I've done. Owls, nighthawks, especially in
Owls.
eastern Washington, nighthawks are a fascinating nocturnal species that takes a deep dive, and as it dives, it makes like this boom sound.
Oh, wow.
Um, so yeah, so getting people out for nocturnal wildlife tours is a great thing too. These are some photographs of non-sustainable tourism. Going out with your camera and putting
Mhm.
spotlights out on geologic features so that you get a really cool picture. You might get a really cool picture, but you are out there polluting the night when you're light painting. This is called light painting. When you set up your campsite and you have so much light, I mean, if you look at the light around here, this is daylight. And so even for folks that are in this industry and you're trying to promote tourism, when you use photographs like this, you're putting out a wrong message because this is a message of showing how to abuse the night with unuseful light. These boats, that put LED light straight down to the bottom so you can see at night down to the bottom. Well, there are a lot of species down there that need the night as part of their metabolism. They need
Mhm.
the night, and when you do this you are causing stress and you are causing harm, and you could be causing mortalities to a lot of species with putting boats out like this directly into the waters, which is the same thing as having this is a astrotourism destination here
Oh.
abroad. And when you're throwing all this light into you're bringing people for the stars and you're throwing all this light into the water, all this unnecessary light. Light doesn't need to light up the water because there's species living there. The same thing. This is a astrotourism site. You could say, well, that's great. These lights are they're shielded, they're directed down, they're a nice warm amber, which is part of the features. But these are on for what? Right? Who's there? Who's using it? They're just decoration. And lights for decoration really just don't have place anymore if we want to continue to see not only sea stars, but have species thrive that need the night. And this is the fourth astrotourism location, which, okay, you've gone out and you've viewed your telescopes, and then you come into your little lodge and you just throw all that light up into the sky. So, this is not the way to do it. So really pay attention. Okay, so there's this program that most people have heard about this because of the DarkSky International's International Dark Sky Places program. And when we talk about that, it's generally if you want to be one of these certified places, you are pretty much in a minimum 1 year experience, 1 year process, and depending on what type of site you're pursuing and the size and scale and complexity of it, you could be up to, well, we were almost 4 years in the Outback, but there are places that have been over 5 years,
Oh, wow.
and they're still not there. Uh, this is a program that started in 1988. Well, actually 2001. The DarkSky International itself is a nonprofit organization founded in '88, and its sole purpose is to protect the night. And the folks that founded the nonprofit were all into astronomy, but since then most of their staff are in conservation field, and so it's expanded because we've discovered it's more than about stars. It's about we have a lot of harm happening to every kind of species you can imagine under the sun in any kind of category. So right now there's 220 to date, and for some people that might sound like a lot, but if you think about this as worldwide, that doesn't sound like a lot. The reason why it's 220 and not 1,040, because there are a lot of dark sky places, is because it's not just about being dark. These certifications require a commitment to good lighting, a commitment to education and outreach, not just being dark, because there are many darker places than there that are not certified or people aren't even thinking about it. Most of these places are just on the borderline of what we would call a good dark sky. So, and 220 instead of 1,000 is because it does take a committed effort and it does take work. Places that they have available right now are dark sky parks. That's what we have most of, and most of those are national parks and state parks where they have dedicated staff to interpretation. It's part of their mission statement. They have staff. They usually have a Friends of the Park group that can, do the education and outreach. So we have most of these places are parks. And you have to be dark. This is a measure of dark, of night sky quality, and it kind of works almost logarithmically. So I'm in Portland, about 4 miles from downtown, and I'm at about 18. So to be dark, you're 21.2. To be dark enough for a park. To be dark enough for a sanctuary, you're 21.5. That seems like a little bit more, but if you think about 7.1 earthquake or 7.2, 7.2, 10 times stronger. So again, these are orders of magnitude, each little point. A reserve, you might have heard of Idaho, was the first in the Pacific Northwest, the Central Idaho International Dark Sky Reserve, and it's about 900,000 acres, and it's mostly Forest Service land. Reserves establish a core, an area that they want to protect, and then there's like a buffer area around it, and there are some in Canada. They're coming more and more but they run about the largest dark sky place of any kind right now is Mexico and Southwest Texas, and it's a reserve, and it's mostly private land, and it's well over 1 million acres, but most of them are well under 1 million acres. Communities is the second largest category. You do not have to be dark, but most communities that pursue this nomination pursue it because they want to stay dark or they want to attract tourism, and they're usually smaller communities because of the effort at hand. They have to adopt an ordinance. They have to adopt an outdoor lighting ordinance to be to even qualify for it. But that's the second most category you'll see in terms of numbers of that 220 to date. So you have small communities and parks, and then sanctuaries. I think we're up to 15 sanctuaries. That's what the dark sky that's what the Oregon Outback is a sanctuary. Also just in Nevada, right on the Oregon border, is Massacre Rim at about 250,000 acres. That's a dark sky sanctuary. Urban Night Sky Place, I've pursued one right in the city of Portland. You do not have to be dark. You just have to have an area where you're protected from light, so you have some natural kind of shielding, from the glare, where you could set up some outreach events. And you have to have 100% of your lights be dark sky compliant under a lighting management plan prior to application. So it's a hard lift to get all your lights. It costs money. It takes time to do inventories to get to 100%. But since that type of category came into place, the first one was just outside of Albuquerque. I think we're up to about 10 now. I have
Oh,
to
wow.
check. So it has grown very, very quickly, very quickly. And the last one is very, very new, just within the past year, and it's called DarkSky Approved Lodging. And this had everybody really excited right from the beginning. Everybody's like, "Well, I'm just going to go after this." Well, I've reviewed it, and my advice to most people, unless you're Skamania Lodge, for those who might know in Skamania County, maybe on the call on the Columbia Gorge, unless you're a really big resort, I, I think it's not very cost effective for most lodging facilities. It's pretty expensive process, unlike the others. Uh, there's an expense of people that you need to do work, but this is an expense just in the fees themselves, just in the fees that it takes to get the application, not even to mention any kind of assistance that you might need, any technical assistance. It's just the fees themselves are pretty expensive. So if you're interested in that, um, you know, just say to yourself, if you're a small inn, it's probably not going to be cost effective for you. There's other ways that you can get really good dark sky tourism business without being a lodge. And then just really quickly, again, how do dark skies benefit wildlife and the environment? Well, every day needs a night, and every creature on this planet, from an amoeba to a tree to a whale, has evolved with a night and a day. And so when we take away and we disrupt that nighttime, we are disrupting all the different behaviors, and we're disrupting all those mechanisms that creatures have developed to survive. All these adaptations. I mean, if you look at a bat is the most perfectly night adapted creature that you can imagine. An owl has developed wings that are absolutely silent. You can hardly pick up any sound when they monitor sound of an owl in flight, and that's because it has been adapted to be stealth so it can hunt. Well, now there's all this light, so there's no owl being stealth anymore in light polluted areas. And so, if we think about the night as habitat, then we might start to protect that night, because we really are protecting habitat, and we are creatures too. And if you look at this diagram, we have a circadian rhythm. We have a clock inside of us that's adapted to this night and day, and we're diurnal species. We're more active during the day, and when that light starts to go away, it tells our body time to rest, time to shut off the digestive system, time to release melatonin to help you sleep. And then that light comes back and it's time to wake up. So we're all adapted to it. And so when we protect the night, we protect ecosystem health.
Excellent. Okay,
Culturally,
last slide,
yeah,
Dawn.
yeah, last one.
Okay.
We've been looking at the skies for as long as people have been on planet Earth, right? And so we think that's about 300,000 years. And that night, that looking into that void with these lights and some objects that seem to move, that has inspired just about every religious tradition on the planet. And that has inspired art and poetry and music. And that has inspired we've got the Babylonians here to look up and to study what is that, what's happening. And we have astronomy. And from astronomy, we got physics. And from physics, we got chemistry. And from chemistry, we got biology. So it really has been a gateway science. And I just, we look at Starry Night painting. And here's Van Gogh looking out at the starry night. Imagine Van Gogh now opening his window, seeing Venus all aglow right now. He wouldn't be seeing all those stars because they'd be washed out with light pollution. And I just love this because there's so many writings from Van Gogh of his love of the stars in the night. I don't know anything with certainty, but seeing the stars makes me dream. And then this is just I just want to put a shout out to what you can do for advocacy. The biggest thing for folks on the phone is if you live in a community that has not changed out its lights yet, its street lights, be sure to get engaged so that really bright white lights, especially those unshielded, don't go into place, because once they go into place, they're there for 25, 40 years, and they are going to be 2 to 3 times more light polluting than the lights you have now. If you want to, these are going in all over small communities in Oregon. These acorn lights, they're not shielded. They're super, super bright. We call them light bombs. And if you want to look historic and make an attractive main street, you can have a light like this. This is an old barn light. That's historic. These are historic looking. These are actually more historic in terms of their look because gas lights didn't have exposed tops. They had caps on them because they were a flame inside. So these are actually more historic, but these are all dark sky friendly. So there are ways to be attractive, to have an attractive downtown Main Street with lights that aren't light polluting. And so if you have an awareness and you're mindful of this and you use the proper technology, there's a solution of addressing light pollution and of making your town or your county a destination. And I'll leave this here, you'll see this later, but these are just the simple ways of being responsible for outdoor lighting.
Excellent. Thanks, Don. Yeah, folks, I'm going to try to shepherd us right along in this webinar today because we have a guest speaker that will join, or an extra speaker, surprise speaker that will join the group discussion a little later. David Ingram from Washington's own International Dark Sky chapter. So I'll get to Dave a little later. But Don, great presentation. Love your slide deck. Folks, you'll get a PDF copy of Don's slide deck with a link to the recording in an email from me on Friday or Monday. But before we go to Bob and talk about Southern Oregon, Don, I just want to ask you 2 questions because we're kind of running up on your time here. Let's see. So Dark Sky, the certification from Dark Sky International, it's one thing to obtain the certification. You said in one instance 4 or 5 years. What happens how do entities keep the certification?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of people say that's half the work. It's getting the certification and then you have to maintain it. And so the measures are different based on which type of designation you are, but in general, for all of them, you are obliged to continue monitoring your skies at night to show that you're not having more pollution in your area, that what you're doing is at least staying stable and not getting worse. And so sky quality monitoring is a commitment to continue to do that.
On an annual
There's also
basis?
on an annual basis.
Okay.
And that can be simple, a few handheld measurements with a sky quality monitor or having a, a, a device in place like we do in the Outback. But the other one is education and outreach. This is an education and outreach program. This isn't an award for being dark. This is an award for being stewards of the night. And so with it comes an obligation to continue to provide outreach. And part of that outreach is to do outreach with those areas around you. So to reduce the threats that the areas around you, I mean, you can be really dark. I mean, it's dark above Rainier. There are not a lot of lights. It's very dark over Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. It's the lights from outside that are encroaching and coming in. So, you have to have an outreach program with those folks to maintain some type of partnership so that you can address those threats to your dark sky place.
And is there an annual report that gets sent to Dark Sky International so it's shared internally or externally with
Yes,
stakeholders?
and
Okay.
it goes on their website, so anybody can read these annual reports.
Okay.
And these annual reports include the sky quality monitoring, what outreach has been done, and if you have an obligation of how many lights, that are going to need to be consistent with a lighting management plan, you have to report on your progress because you have actual goals. For a sanctuary and a park, you have goals of 67% of the lights have to be consistent, like dark sky friendly at the time of application, 90% in 5 years and 100% in 10 years. And so you have
10
to
years.
report on
Okay.
that progress.
Okay. Okay, Don, last question quickly, and then we can get to Bob. Does a destination lodging establishment, like you mentioned earlier, or an attraction need to be? Is it necessary to have the certification from Dark Sky International to practice dark sky tourism? What say you?
Yeah, you'll hear different opinions from other people depending on their motives, but I'm a one for all for one. Um, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think these designations can be very strategic in an area so that you can get yourself on the, on the radar of folks as a destination, but you don't need to go through all the work to be a tourist attraction. You can, if you're a lodge, if you're a guide service, you can say that you use sustainable practices in bringing people out at night. If you're a lodge, on your website, you can say that you have done inventories and you have made all your lighting dark sky friendly so that people, that's a key word for people like myself who want to go to and enjoy a night sky or bring my telescope. If I see where they have all dark sky compliant lights, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Or they're not putting on their lights. So, it's how you market it. And then if you're working with your local destination management organizations and you're partnering them so you can get your information out, because it's really, for most people, that certification is just publicity, but people have to look for it, or it's just a single news article. But if you're working with your DMOs, then you can get that information out. You can get in magazines. You can get that information out if you're partnered with your tourism leaders.
excellent. Thanks, Don. This question I had for Don, but I'm going to kind of give it to Bob, and I think you're going to hit on all of this, Bob. What should tourism stakeholders consider when deciding to pursue certification via Dark Sky International? How much time, planning, resources go into the application process? How many stakeholders should be involved in that process? Bob, I think you're going to tackle all of that with the Oregon Outback and the certification that you all received. Why don't you go ahead and share your slide deck and your screen now? And we
Oh,
can dive into
let's
the
see.
Oregon Outback.
That's not the one we wanted, right? We want this one. Hi, everybody.
Excellent.
Yeah, am I good?
Yep, you are good. We can see your slide deck and we can hear you just fine, Bob. So
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think just in the course of looking through this case study, and I'll move through it because I know we have other guests. Most of those questions you raised, Matt, will get addressed, and then I'll just
excellent.
hang tight for the moment. This is just sort of, again, where Dawn and I have worked together for years on this particular project. As always, she's just a champion at the why and the what. Let's just go into a case study here, a little bit more about the how in terms of as tourism agencies, right? Again, and you all who do these things, you do destination management workshops, you do rural tourism studios, you go into communities. First thing you got to assess, what do you got? What do you have on the ground? And so this is just a way to look at, this is what we had. Okay. When Lake County had a rural tourism studio, um, there's lots of stuff that's going on there, but this was sort of an asset that I had been aware of. Dawn had been doing work completely separately in part of her vision for what could happen. And so this is the kind of information that I had going into that rural tourism studio. Turns out that was not a topic of conversation in 2018 at that tourism studio, because there were other good projects about Western heritage and about geological features, about outdoor rec. And it's not always your moment to throw the thing on the table, right? However, as we get down the road, what to do during the day is just as important as what to do during the night when it comes to talking about a destination. And so that was very important work to happen. But bringing this Dark Sky Place project in 2018 to the Warner Canyon Ski Lodge in Lake County was sort of a new idea, right? Oregon had at that point, Prineville Reservoir, I believe, was the only certified place in the state. Sun River had done some work previously, and I was able to just sort of take the group through at a certain point when Dawn and I finally in 2019 decided we think we can do this. I mean, we think this is really sort of an opportunity for the Outback to come together and talk about a dark sky place. and formally pursuing it as in the name of all these different things. You'll see I have a slide, why is tourism at the table? Well, we're there for a different reason than astronomers are at the table, or wildlife biologists are at the table, or public agencies are at the table. It's super important as tourism folks to keep in mind that your mission is not their mission. That you're going to be partnering with people who have different missions than you do. Just running through these slides was just to show people like you're not out there on a limb by yourself, right? There's a lot of work going on in very rural Western places to do this, the Basin and Range, Great Basin, Central Idaho. And so as we were proceeding with the conversation, we were getting a thumbs up from the people who were in our room talking about it. And the people in that room, which is unique about this Outback project, we didn't have a state park. We didn't have a national park. We didn't have a national monument in this area. There still isn't one of those. What we have are federal and state land agencies who own millions and millions of acres of land. And so, and then we had the county, right? So we had Lake County, and then we had local businesses and chambers. Bringing those groups together was the first step. And what we heard was keep going. The idea didn't scare everybody off. And so as we began to build a network, keep going. Well, to Dawn's point, you have to prove you're dark. And so in our world, this is what this looks like. We have 3 of these out in the Outback in the sanctuary, that every 3 months this data is downloaded, and we work with DarkSky Oregon. You know, we have our technical experts in the state, and that's one of the ways they partner with this project. And like I said, that's not from a tourism angle. They really got the Oregon Sky Glow project going on. This data is useful for them in lots of other ways. We need it for this particular process. And so we are participating with other partners in other missions. Again, here are some of these public outreach events when we were sort of continuing to build support, advocacy for it. Playa Summer Lake is actually an arts and science residency program in Summer Lake. So they are bringing writers, visual artists, environmental thinkers for residencies, and they have all kinds of community work out there. So all of a sudden you have this humanities and science approach to this advocacy that was going on in Lake County as well. And the Playa remains just a solid partner. So sometimes your partners are maybe a little different than you think they are. Maybe you do have an arts and residency program out on an island in the San Juans who are very interested in this work that you may not know about. And all of a sudden outreach events become part of what they do. And that's part of their mission. All right. So they do dark sky programming here at Playa Summer Lake. They have dark sky weekends. And about night sky stories, all these different things. The question from the very beginning that was always very clear to be in a room with people and explain, why am I here? Like, why is the executive director of Travel Southern Oregon talking to you? Right? Because sometimes that's not intuitive. And sometimes that kind of change isn't actually necessarily what people want. And the answer to that question is that there is an economic impact reason for us to be at the table. And so that's just sort of the baseline. When we do the rural tourism studio work and you do that work in there, at the end of the day, there has to be some benefit to the community. And the most recent study, and there may be more recent ones now that I'm not aware of, but the Colorado Plateau really started looking at this to sort of somehow quantify it. And the end takeaway from that was that people who are engaged in night sky tourism spend about 3 times as much in your communities as people who don't. And kind of simple reason why: they spend the night, right? So they eat dinner, they have breakfast, and oftentimes they engage. The most recent Park Service information study that I saw had an interesting finding, which is that engaging with guides is a very popular activity for people in this night sky space. Now, there's a category of people who are fine. They know what they're doing. They know what they want. But there's a whole other group of people who really like a guided experience to help experience the place where they are. And then this is, again, the opportunity for our partners in various communities. So I would often share this the why from tourism. Well, I'll come back to this, but this is after talking with partners for 3 or 4 years. Dawn was able to say, I think we still keep our vision. I think we can still go big and we can still go for a sanctuary status. What we heard back from our public lands partners was not in a vanity reason, but bigger was better for them because it helped disperse visitation. And that was very important for people whose mission was to a wildlife refuge. They don't want a lot of people congregating in a certain area all the time. There's just a lot of reasons where dispersed visitation was what they wanted. So we were really responding to our partners. And here's a list of all the partners that really came on as signatories to the light management plan that ultimately was agreed on. One ring to rule them all. And that took years to hammer out with very good feedback from our Forest Service partners and the BLM partners. You just need to know it takes a while. Your best partner at XYZ National Forest, it's going to take them a couple months to move anything through the channels that they need to move through. And you just need to understand that. And so these were all the various partners that we had on the state and federal level, including the Lake County commissioners. And so what we ended up with, 2.5 million acres in Lake County. Dawn has built that application with the Dark Sky. We've done so much of the work to bring Harney and Malheur counties into the sanctuary. We talk about it as the expansion of the sanctuary. I think Dark Sky is hoping that can happen as well. But there's still a little more community work. When you see the Lake County commissioners down here as signatories, as those of you who work in super rural the West, that's not always a slam dunk right there to get a county commission to come on with the light management plan. And so these are the kind of things that take time and still will take a little more time out in Harney and Malheur County. All of these folks came on because we were able to connect what we were hoping to achieve with what their mission is. And so these are the BLM needs to understand why they want to do this. And the Fish and Wildlife Department needs to understand how is that serving our mission as well. ODOT, and this probably will be true in Washington as well. ODOT was the one that probably had the biggest mission non-alignment. Their mission is not to create dark sky places. Their mission is to create safe roads and keep them open. And
Correct.
so sometimes that includes lights. Okay. And so, but I want our partners at ODOT were good partners. It's not like they did not want to have this conversation, right? They just had to be super clear. There's no line item budget for retrofitting 10 area lights at a given depot as for a certain spot. So the kind of assistance you may had to find, and you talked about grants, you talked about other ways. ODOT is fine with putting up a retrofit light, but they don't actually have a line item to buy it. Okay, so if we can deliver these things to them on a work schedule that works for them, that's the way that partnership works, because we understand their mission and they understand what we're trying to achieve. And so every one of these has a different formula, and I just can't stress that enough. It is not one size fits all with your agency partners. And some of you, we do have state parks was actually on this, and you may work a lot with state parks. And then the big one is the Department of the Interior National Park Service. And so we didn't have that in the area where we were. They have the most resources actually to help facilitate this work. As we went forward and finally got that certification in March, we really had to get together the communication piece Dawn was talking about, the press kit links with lots of imagery, make it very easy for people in the media to pull the images that you want them to pull, talk about the facts that you want them to talk about. And aside from this big rollout in March, we have continued to talk to media and host media. But in my role as a destination management organization, I'm not putting the pedal to the metal in terms of marketing this, in terms of, hey, y'all, come to rural Southeast Oregon and, have a great time. Because there are capacity issues. You need to
Sure.
stay in tune with the capacity of your
Well
communities
said, Bob. Well
for
said.
doing that. And that's the biggest challenge, honestly, is getting capacity and then finding the workforce to accommodate people to have these experience, working with your guides and outfitters, providing them the training, removing the barriers that they might have to bring these products into. They may have great kayak product, they have great hiking product, but how do they bring in some dark sky product? In Oregon, we are having those conversations because that right now is the nut that we are really trying to solve, so that people have a great experience across the state with well-trained guides who kind of all understand what we're trying to do. And it's going to take some investment in, maybe they need an astronomy class at OSU, maybe they need a special use permit from the Forest Service to do some tent platforms if they want to, it can take a lot of different shapes, what the barriers are. And that's what we're in the process of really trying to uncover for our workforce here in Oregon. And so I think that's my last one there. And
Oh,
so,
wow. Excellent, Bob. Well, yeah, that's a great segue, I think. And I'll pull in David Ingram a little later, but for this question for Bob and Don, that was a question for the entire group, the panel, the two speakers. What other challenges do rural communities, tourism stakeholders face in regards, regarding dark sky tourism? I think funding is an issue. Bob, you just mentioned capacity, workers, training, um, maybe staffing long-term. I mean, Don, you mentioned that it's a long-term commitment, just through the nomination process, but then keeping the certification. What other challenges might rural communities, tourism stakeholders face? But more importantly, how, in your experience, how have these communities and these stakeholders overcome these challenges?
well, I'll just go quickly with the sanctuary. We're really right in the middle of it. So, I wish I had sort of wise answers to some of those questions. We're kind of in this Ben Franklin moment, right? Where, it's a republic if you can keep it, right?
Yes,
So the
yes.
sanctuary, if we can keep it, and I think we can keep it, but you know what? We're right in the middle. We haven't done our first annual report, right? Dawn and I, we want to see 4 or 5 retrofits happen this year, right? And so a challenge is you lose partners. You lose Forest Service staff, you lose BLM staff, people move on, they haven't trained up the new person. So you're starting a relationship from ground one, and they could say, well, what do you mean I need to retrofit? Well, we've just been talking to, Joey for 3 years about XYZ, and now Joey's gone. Right. And so real boats rock, and people transition out. So you really try to build within agencies a good communication chain, and always, who's my next person? That's what I always ask. Like, if who's next, if I can't reach you, who do I call? Because we need more than one person in your agency to know what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you. Don,
Yeah.
did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would say it's, the way we went about this was to make sure that we had something lasting. And to have something lasting, you have to have full stakeholder buy-in. And so, there are a lot of places out there that have a single champion, like a single park ranger, might just think this is a great thing. This would be a great feather in my cap, and does the work and writes it up and tries to do it on their own. And you get a certification, and guess what? Then that ranger goes off and goes somewhere else. And who's picking up, who's doing the work? And so we didn't want to do it that way. And that's my advice to everybody who's going after that, you know, planning, I guess planning is important, building the grassroots. And so the challenges is really working across the spectrum of all stakeholders. There's always going to be somebody who comes out of the woodwork after you think you've done the work. But if you have a good, solid, diverse base of people who are interested, they see the usefulness of such a thing. They see you know, and I'm not talking about necessarily even a dark sky place, but a dark sky tourism initiative at their destination. It's really having more players so that when you do have turnover or when things do change, you still have a solid group of folks who are committed. And so a single champion, a champion helps. I mean, Bob and I are champions. I mean, you need a champion, but you need a team.
Yes, well
So
said.
you need leadership, but you need a team.
Thanks,
And
Don.
another challenge, you need to stay ahead of you need to be myth busting all along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Myth number
That's-
one. Myth number one, we don't want any lights. Not true.
Okay.
We want good
Yes.
light.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
You're gonna fine me if I don't change my lights out. Untrue, right?
Okay.
You know, so there's just, and when you get into communities, you know, word goes like wildfire. And honestly, you got to stay ahead and you got to hear what's going on. You got to go in there and listen and let people come at you, because people will come at you with their concerns. And you got to keep listening until they're done, because you got to get them all on the table.
Yeah, you're talking about community relations, Bob. Geez, that's another hat
100%.
we all have to wear. Yes, I totally get that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
because
good
you know
point.
what? Because then here's how it played out in the Outback when we talked to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife up at Hart Mountain. And Todd at the BLM district managers. What did they want to know at early on? Is the community behind this?
Yeah.
So here you have federal land managers, because guess what? They live there. They you know what I mean? And they do not want to get too far out ahead of a community. They're brave people. They'll go a little bit ahead, but they don't want to get really way out ahead of a
True.
community.
No, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to throw in the Outback is such an extreme case. I really don't envision another Outback anywhere in the US happening. I mean,
Yeah.
we'd really just had an opportunity and we seized that opportunity. I mean, you could just see from the maps. Washington, you have nationally renowned national parks and monuments. You have globally known Mount St. Helens. Everybody saw pictures of half of that mountain coming apart. And so I think, you know, and you have small communities. And so I think you know, if there are designations, it's going to be something of a park or community with strategy around a big national park or some special state park. So we're kind of in a unique seat. Most sanctuaries are small and a single manager. So almost all but one other that's in New Zealand, and they have 3 partners. We worked with 17 for the whole expanded area.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, you're usually working with just the Park Service staff and not everybody else. So it's a whole very different kind of approach, but you still have to have a team beyond your park. You still have to have the nearest gateway communities around your park engaged.
Good point. Marianne.
Yes, I have to jump off, but I wanted to let everyone know that the webinar is recorded, correct, Matt?
Correct.
And will be shared with registrants and also added to our YouTube channel, which I dropped the playlist for that in the chat previously, along with a link to our industry newsletter and our grants resources page. So those are up. If you scroll through the chat, you should be able to find those.
Cool.
And yeah,
Thank you, Marianne.
I'm hopping off. So any other questions, Matt will be able to assist with that. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, folks, as always, we have too much fun and time flies on this webinar. The good news is Bob and Don can stick around a little extra. If you all can, this is the time for you. If you have any questions, you can pop those into the chat. I will unmute Mr. Ingram, and so he can say hello. David Ingram represents the Washington chapter of Dark Skies International. We can listen to any comments he has over this webinar. And I will keep an eye on the chat. Again, the slide decks from Don and Bob will be sent to you. And I'll also include a toolkit, the Dark Sky Tourism Toolkit from Travel Oregon that Dawn helped create. I'll include that in the email follow-up as well. It's a great resource. That resource is free and open to the public, but I'll attach it in the email to you. Okay, let me find Dave. And Dave, I'm going to unmute you so you can say hello and introduce yourself to the folks on the call, some of whom are from Washington. I'm sure there's other folks maybe in Oregon and Idaho that this webinar usually attracts a good amount of people from across the country. Mr. Ingram, hello.
Hello. Hi, stargazers.
Good morning. Any comments today? Did you want to talk about what the work that you're doing in Washington or what the chapter is up to?
Well, with regard to the entire dark sky movement, it's always been a win-win-win proposition. And I know that sometimes people react in a negative manner to controls from outside of their community. But the dark sky from the very beginning for 30 years now has always been predicated on the premise that it's a win-win-win situation. And if you look at the 200 plus different parks and entities that are around, all of those parks have been labors of joy and love. And in each of those cases, the team members are proud enough of their work that they actually involve their families, their kids and their grandkids, and what they've established all the way around the world has been a point of pride for generation after generation. And this is the kind of revelation that people experience when they first step out under the night sky and experience a natural dark sky full of lights that they're totally unfamiliar with. And it launches them on a path of discovery.
I agree. Spending time on the West Coast of the South Island in New Zealand and looking up at the Milky Way, and then chasing kiwis, not chasing, but going on a kiwi tour with a local guy, doing that at night. I mean, it opened up so many opportunities for me and a tourism career. So I totally understand that. Any other comments, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just really enthused about what Dawn and the team down in Oregon have been able to accomplish, not only with the Outback, but also with Prineville and the observatory over at Sun Mountain, not Sun Mountain, Pine, isn't it?
Sun River.
Sun River.
Mhm.
And we've got our own initiatives up in this area as well. And, you know, we're tremendously proud of being part of a team that annually has what we call a annual general meeting that goes 24 hours. If you have the opportunity, to join our general meeting, it's coming up in November. It lasts from 6 p.m. one night to 6 p.m. the next day, and it's actually representatives of the dark sky advocacy around the world in a 24-hour period. And most of those have all been captured on YouTube videos, and they're available to interested parties on the YouTube video channel for Dark Skies International, or International Dark Skies. And I really encourage people to take a deep dive into the YouTube videos that are there. Everybody from Isaac Asimov all the way to TED Talks, they've been spectacular.
Excellent. Yes, I'll have to add those to my watch list. Thanks, Dave. Feel free to hang on, Dave. You can still stick around in case someone has a question specifically for you in the Washington chapter, but it looks like there's a few folks still on the call. Any other questions, folks? Comments, concerns? Let us know. You can pop those into the chats. I might have one question for all the attendees. Okay. Seeing no questions. Folks, I know there's just a few of you left on the webinar today. shoot me a message. Let me know if what stage of dark sky tourism you're in. If you're in the exploratory stage, just having early discussions with community leaders, industry folks, let me know. Or if you folks, if there's serious progress being made and you're ready for a workshop, or you're ready for an expert to come in and keynote a talk, a community meeting, let me know as well. Maybe that could be done. State of Washington Tourism is kind of playing with the idea of dark sky tourism, building this in to one of the destination development programs that State of Washington Tourism operates, the Rural Tourism Support Program. But like I said, there's other opportunities, grant funding to explore this form of tourism in your destination. And as Bob and I talked yesterday, and Don, it doesn't have to be rural. These can also be urban areas where you can actually consider dark sky tourism opportunities as well. So I'm thinking some of the suburbs outside of Bellevue, Seattle, Vancouver, things of that nature. There might be opportunity here as well. Thank you, Robert. I see your note in the chat. Okay, folks, we are about 7 minutes over. Shauna, thank you. I see that. Parting words. Mr. Hackett, do you have any words of wisdom, advice as we sign off today?
Words of wisdom, it's going to take longer than you think, but it's going to be better than you hope, right?
Oh,
You just
nice.
got to keep going and listen.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Bob. Don, what about you?
If you're a guide or you're a lodge, you don't have to have an astronomy degree or even be an amateur astronomer. It takes very little to engage the public. You could just provide a pair of binoculars and entertain your guests.
Thanks, Don. And David, what about you?
Yeah, well, if you're involved in entertainment and cruises and lodging and things like that, I know that you're probably familiar with the huge influx of people from the Orient, Asia, as they go up to the hot springs up in Alaska. They actually fly in 747s full of tourists just to come to see the aurora. And I'm suggesting that the state of Washington has a grand sky as well that may attract buses from the boat lines and everything else up to Hurricane Ridge and Mazama and out to eastern Washington along the Grand Coulee, along that area. Those are areas that would be particularly ripe for astrotourism.
Excellent. Yes, I agree.
Well, and as your friendly competitor to the south, the fact that the Asian flights are not coming into PDX and they are all routing through Seattle, you do have an opportunity with that Asian market that we don't, just sort of right out of the gate when they first arrive. And I think you're spot on, David. I think that's a huge opportunity. And we in Oregon, our global sales team, they love these projects. But we need more guides, like you said, more product for people.
Well, the other thing is that if you are able to attend one of our annual general meetings, you'll find out many of our speakers and much of our enthusiasm is coming from mainland China. That's kind of an amazing attribute, but the Chinese community government is really embracing dark skies in a huge way. And it kind of puts us in some cases, it puts us in the shade, which is a wonderful place for a dark sky person to be. But those programs and those initiatives are absolutely dazzling compared to a lot of what we've been doing.
Wow. Yes, much more to come. And David, I hope to work with your organization in the future. I hope we see Bob and Don again. And folks, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Tourism Skillshop, Dark Sky Tourism. And stay tuned next month where we focus in on social inclusion. The philosophy from Destinations International will focus on an aspect of two of that philosophy in the Skillshop for September. Until next time, take care and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.